was supposed to be just another late night dare. Mark and his two friends had broken into the abandoned high school on the edge of town, a place that had been shut down for almost 20 years. Dust covered the lockers, broken glass crunched beneath their shoes, and the flicker of their flashlights painted eerie shapes on the walls. Near the main hallway, Mark noticed something carved deep into the wall, scratched in jagged letters. There are strange rules to follow. Beneath it, a numbered list was etched into the concrete. The rules were oddly specific. Do not open locker 306. Never look directly at the figure in the hallway. If the lights flicker twice, close your eyes. Leave before the bell rings. The writing was old, almost fossilized into the wall, but fresh red smears stained the lockers beside it, like someone had pressed bloody hands there just hours before. At first, Mark laughed it off, saying it was probably just graffiti left by other kids. But his laughter felt hollow in the silent, suffocating air of the school. The deeper they walked into the hallway, the more his chest tightened. Then, the overhead lights buzzed, dimmed, and flickered once. Everyone froze. "Relax. It's just the power," his friend whispered, but even his voice trembled. The second flicker came. The entire corridor dropped into pitch darkness for a split second. And when the lights buzzed back on, there was a tall, shadowy figure standing at the end of the hallway, perfectly still, its head tilted slightly as though it had been watching them the whole time. Mark remembered rule number 2. Never look directly at the figure, but it was already too late. He had locked eyes with it. The lockers rattled violently around them, slamming open and shut as if invisible hands were inside. The sound of a bell, loud, shrill, impossible, because the school had no power, echoed through the halls. Mark realized with a sinking dread that every single rule on that wall was real, and he had already broken 2 of them. The sound of the bell wouldn't stop. It rang again and again, echoing through the decayed halls as if the entire school had come back to life. Mark's friends grabbed his arms, pulling him backward, whispering in panic, "Don't look at it! Don't!" But he already had, and the figure at the end of the hallway was moving. It didn't walk. It didn't run. It simply shifted, like the shadows themselves were bending, closing the distance inch by inch whenever they blinked. The rules carved into the wall burned in his mind. If the lights flicker twice, close your eyes. He hadn't. He couldn't. His curiosity had forced them open. The lockers slammed louder, metal clanging like gunshots. One locker door burst off its hinges, skidding across the floor with a deafening crash. From inside, something whispered. Words too faint to understand, but Mark felt them pressing directly into his skull. His flashlight flickered, then died completely. The hallway light above them buzzed weakly. Once, twice, then stayed dim. "Rule number 4, Mark muttered, his voice trembling. "Leave before the bell rings." But the bell was already ringing. His friends bolted toward the exit, their footsteps pounding against the tile. Mark turned to follow, yet when he spun around, the hallway wasn't the same. The exit doors had vanished. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions, lined with lockers that weren't there before. And in every reflection of the locker doors, dozens of figures stared back at him, tall, dark silhouettes with glowing eyes. Mark's breath came in short, sharp bursts. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The endless hallway seemed to stretch and twist with each step, the walls bending as if the building itself was alive. The bell rang again, deafening, rattling the air like an explosion inside his skull. The figures in the locker reflections moved closer. He could see their crooked hands pressing against the glass, long fingers scratching from the inside as if they were trying to claw their way out. A sudden metallic bang echoed behind him. He whipped around. One locker, number 306, was slowly creaking open on its own. Rule number 1, do not open locker 306. Mark's eyes widened. He hadn't touched it, but something inside was forcing it open. The door swung wider, groaning, and a smell of rot poured into the hallway. He could hear breathing, wet, ragged breathing, coming from deep within the locker's darkness. His 2 friends were gone. Their footsteps, their panicked whispers, vanished. The only sound left was the bell, the breathing, and the sharp scratch of nails dragging across metal. Mark staggered backward, trembling, his voice breaking as he whispered to himself, "If the rules are real, then breaking them means..." The hallway lights flickered once, then again, and when they came back on, the figure was no longer at the far end of the hallway. It was standing just a few feet away from him. The figure loomed just a few feet away, its outline sharper now, its skin stretched too tight over its bones, its mouth torn into a grin that was far too wide, far too human. The glowing eyes burned into Mark's and his legs locked in place. He couldn't move. The lockers along the hallway began to slam open one by one in rapid succession. Bang, bang, bang. Each one revealed nothing but blackness inside, but the air grew colder with every slam. Mark turned his head for only a second, and when he looked back, the figure had vanished. But he could still feel it, standing behind him, breathing down his neck. His body shook as he whispered the rules to himself again, desperate, clinging to them like a lifeline. Never look directly at the figure. Don't open locker 306. Leave before the bell rings. The bell shrieked once more, so loud it made the tiles on the floor crack. He pressed his hands against his ears, but the sound wasn't just in the hallway, it was inside his skull. Suddenly, the scratched writing on the walls seemed to change. The words warped, the letters rearranging themselves until new sentences bled through the cracks in the concrete. You've already failed. The rules are not to protect you. They are to keep me contained. The ground beneath him trembled. The walls stretched taller, the lockers rattling like cages about to burst. Mark stumbled forward, choking on the thick fog that now poured from every direction, swallowing the hallway in darkness. And from that darkness came the sound of hundreds of footsteps, slow, steady, surrounding him. The footsteps echoed closer, surrounding Mark from every direction. He spun wildly, his flashlight useless, the fog too dense to pierce. Dozens, no, hundreds of silhouettes moved just beyond his vision, shifting like shadows that had taken form. The walls groaned, cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling, dust falling in clouds. The scratched words on the wall kept shifting, rewriting themselves in frantic strokes as if unseen claws were etching them live. Do not run. Do not scream. Do not breathe. Mark's chest tightened. He tried to hold his breath, but panic betrayed him. The sound of his ragged inhale echoed unnaturally loud in the hallway. Instantly, the figures in the reflection snapped their heads toward him. All at once, dozens of glowing eyes staring, unblinking, directly at his face through the steel locker doors. A deafening silence fell. Even the bell had stopped. And then, bang! Every locker burst open at once. From each one, hands clawed outward, skeletal fingers stretching, scraping the tiles, pulling themselves into the hall. Their movements were jagged, unnatural, as if the air itself resisted their presence. Mark stumbled back until his spine slammed against locker 306, the one he was warned never to open. The rotten stench rolled over him again, heavier this time, almost choking. From the darkness of the locker behind his back, a whisper slithered into his ear. Not in the hallway, not from the figures. It was inside the locker. You broke the rules. Now you belong to us. Mark froze, his back pressed hard against locker 306 as the whisper seeped deeper into his skull. The hallway was alive with movement, figures spilling from the lockers, their bodies long and twisted, dragging themselves across the cracked floor. The overhead light flickered violently, strobing the hall in jagged flashes. In one flicker, the corridor was empty. In the next, dozens of eyeless faces leaned out from the fog, their mouths stretched open in silent screams. Another flicker, and they were closer. Mark clawed at the walls, desperate to escape, but the hallway had no end anymore. The doors were gone, replaced by endless rows of lockers, each one rattling, each one waiting to open. The whisper behind him grew louder, clearer until it wasn't one voice but hundreds, layered together in a chorus that scraped against his sanity. The rules are binding. The rules are eternal. The rules are broken. The bell tolled again, so loud it felt like his bones would shatter. He dropped to his knees, clutching his ears, screaming. But no sound came out of his mouth. His voice had been stolen. When he looked up, the figure, the same tall shadow with glowing eyes, was standing just a breath away. Its face leaned down into his, close enough that he could feel the icy air pouring from its grin. And then the locker behind him began to open, slowly, groaning. A darkness deeper than the fog leaked from inside, spilling across the floor like ink. Mark realized in that last second of clarity that every single rule had been designed to stop this. And now, nothing could. The air turned heavy, pressing down on Mark's chest as the locker behind him yawned open wider. The darkness that spilled from it wasn't just black, it was alive. It slithered across the tiles like liquid shadows, curling around his legs, climbing up his arms, cold as ice but burning into his skin. The figures that had crawled from the other lockers stopped. They froze in place, bowing their heads low as if in reverence to whatever was emerging. The entire hallway fell into a dreadful silence, broken only by Mark's frantic heartbeat. From the depths of locker 306, a hand emerged. Not human. The fingers were impossibly long, jointed wrong, with nails like broken glass. The hand gripped the edge of the locker door and pulled. The metal shrieked as it bent outward, warping under the force. Something massive was inside, something far too large to have ever fit within. Mark wanted to run, but the shadows held him fast, pinning him in place. He could only watch as a second hand reached out and then a head pushed through, a head with no features except for a mouth carved ear to ear, filled with endless rows of teeth. The whispers all around him rose to a chant, shaking the walls. You broke the rules, you broke the rules, you broke the rules. The figure with glowing eyes leaned close to him, almost gently, as if delivering him to the thing in the locker. And for the first time, Mark understood. The rules weren't warnings. They were chains. The creature dragged itself further out of locker 306. Its body unfolded in impossible ways, bones cracking as it stretched, joints bending backward, skin splitting like old parchment. The shadows that held Mark pulsed in rhythm with its movements, tightening every time it crept closer. The air reeked of mold, rust, and blood. The fog had thickened so much that Mark could barely see the walls, but he could hear them. Deep, guttural groans, like the school itself was alive and in pain. The hallway lights flickered again, not twice this time, but endlessly, buzzing, strobing, burning his eyes with flashes of sickly white. In every burst of light, Mark saw something different. His friends, hanging from the ceiling like broken puppets. Dozens of faces pressed against the fog, mouths moving soundlessly. The shadowy figure, now standing behind him, its grin stretching wider, wider, wider. Mark tried to scream, but his throat locked up. His voice was gone, stolen by the whispers that now roared like a crowd. The writing on the wall shifted once more. The final line carved itself violently into the concrete, each letter gouged out by invisible claws. The last rule, do not look inside the locker. But the door was already open, and the thing inside was fully free now. It towered over him, blotting out the flickering lights, its rows of teeth grinding as it leaned down. The shadows wrapped tighter, lifting Mark from the ground, dragging him toward the black abyss that leaked from the locker. Mark's body dangled above the floor, suspended in the writhing shadows that poured from locker 306. His limbs were numb, his chest locked tight as if the air had been drained from his lungs. The creature's head tilted, rows of teeth clicking in a rhythm that echoed like clock hands in his skull. Its body scraped the ceiling, bending the steel beams as if they were paper. The chanting voices around him grew louder, almost deafening now. The rules are broken. The rules are broken. The rules are broken. The lockers down the hall began to warp, twisting and melting into the walls until the entire corridor became one endless, pulsing tunnel of flesh and rusted metal. The smell of decay seeped into his skin, making his stomach convulse. Through the haze, Mark saw his reflection in the nearest locker door. But it wasn't his reflection. The image staring back had hollow eyes, skin stretched thin, and a wide grin carved across its face, the same as the figures that surrounded him. Its lips moved in perfect sync with the whispers flooding his head. You were never meant to follow the rules. You were meant to replace them. The shadows tightened their grip, dragging him slowly, inch by inch, into the yawning void of locker 306. The darkness inside pulsed like a living heart, beating faster with every second. Mark's fingernails scraped helplessly against the lockers as the shadows dragged him closer to the black, pulsing void of locker 306. The air vibrated with the low hum of something ancient, something alive. Every second inside that hallway felt stretched, endless, like time itself was being swallowed. The figure with glowing eyes stood inches away, its face nearly touching his. Its mouth opened, but instead of words, only static poured out. A piercing electrical shriek that rattled his skull. The walls around him shifted again, the graffiti crawling like living worms. The old carved rules melted, replaced by new ones, etched in dripping crimson. 1. You will not resist. 2. You will not escape. 3. You will not be remembered. Mark's eyes darted wildly, searching for his friends, but the hallway was empty. Their absence cut deeper than the shadows choking him. Had they ever been there at all? The creature inside the locker shifted, its teeth clattering like bones. From the abyss came a sound, a heartbeat, heavy and wrong, each thud shaking the tiles beneath him. The darkness inside pulsed in sync with his own chest as though the thing was rewriting his rhythm, claiming his body. The figures lining the hallway bowed lower, their whispers blending into a single, unified voice. He breaks the rules, he becomes the rules. Mark screamed, but no sound left his lips. His reflection in the warped steel of Locker 306 smiled back at him, wide, jagged, and inhuman. And then the shadows gave one final, violent pull. The shadows yanked Mark forward until his face hovered just inches from the gaping black void of Locker 306. The stench of rot and rusted blood hit him so hard it made his eyes water, but he couldn't look away. The darkness wasn't empty. It moved. Shapes swirled inside it, writhing like a nest of serpents, twisting and breaking apart, reforming into distorted human faces that screamed silently before melting back into the black. His chest convulsed. Each heartbeat felt stolen, like the void was sucking the life out of him one throb at a time. Then the glowing-eyed figure raised its hand. Long, jagged fingers pointed directly at his chest. The moment it did, Mark's ribcage cracked. He gasped as his own bones creaked outward, his body rebelling against him. The shadows seeped into the cracks of his skin, burning like acid and freezing like ice all at once. The graffiti on the wall pulsed brighter, letters carved deeper into the concrete until they bled. You do not break the rules, you become the rules. The figures that had crawled from the lockers began to chant in perfect unison, their mouths tearing wider, jawbones snapping as they roared the words over and over. The hallway shook, lockers slamming open and shut violently as if the whole school was collapsing in on itself. Mark's reflection twisted again. His face was gone. Hollow sockets stared back, and his mouth stretched into the same horrific grin as the shadow that stood before him. And still the shadows dragged him closer, closer, to the yawning locker as though it wasn't a storage space at all, but a doorway. The shadows gave one final, violent pull. Mark's body was wrenched into the gaping maw of Locker 306. The instant he crossed the threshold, the world behind him collapsed. The hallway, the lockers, even the screaming figures, all sucked inward, as though the school itself had never existed. There was nothing left but darkness. Inside the void, Mark's body twisted and cracked, his screams swallowed by the endless chorus. The rules carved into his mind rewrote themselves with fire and ash, searing across his skull until there was nothing left of who he was. When the locker door finally slammed shut with a thunderous clang, the hallway was still again. Silent. Empty. Dust drifted in the faint light of the flickering bulb. On the wall, where the old rules had once been scratched, new words gleamed fresh and deep as though carved only moments ago. Rule number 5. Do not ask who made the rules. Rule number 6. The rules need a keeper. The camera would linger on the final detail. Locker 306 slowly rattling from the inside.